Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the transport ship's viewing deck, watching Earth grow larger through the reinforced glass. Home. The word felt strange in his mind after 3 years fighting in the Outer Rim Wars. His reflection stared back at him. A 16-year-old face that had seen too much. Eyes that held memories no child should carry. The other passengers gave him space. They always did when they noticed the scars running down his left arm, or the way he instinctively checked exits in every room. What they couldn't see were the medals packed away in his duffel bag, or the commendations from alien commanders who had watched this human child do impossible things. Terra station approaching, the automated voice announced. All passengers prepare for docking. Marcus touched the small device behind his ear. His universal translator. Soon he wouldn't need it anymore. No more alien languages, no more coalition briefings, no more watching his squad mates die in the cold vacuum of space. Just English, just Earth, just normal teenage life. The war had started when Marcus was 13. The hegemony, a collection of 12 alien species, had declared humanity too dangerous to exist. They said humans were unpredictable, too emotional, too willing to sacrifice themselves for others. They called it a flaw that made humans unfit for civilized space. They were wrong about it being a flaw. When the first hegemony ships attacked Luna Colony, every human settlement had called for volunteers. Marcus had lied about his age, forged his documents, and joined the Coalition Defense Force. His parents had tried to stop him, but by then the recruiters had already seen what he could do. Humans, it turned out, had something the 12 species of the hegemony lacked. While aliens fought with logic and calculation, humans fought with heart. When a Zephyrian commander would retreat after losing 30% of their forces, a human would charge forward to save a single fallen comrade. When a Kellian strategist would sacrifice a position to preserve resources, a human would hold the line until reinforcements arrived, no matter the cost. Marcus remembered his first real battle at Kepler Station. His squad had been pinned down by hegemony shock troops, 8-foot-tall Korathi warriors with energy weapons that could punch through steel. The aliens had superior numbers, better equipment, and tactical advantage. But they hadn't expected a 13-year-old human boy to crawl through ventilation shafts for 6 hours, plant explosives throughout their command ship, and then broadcast a surrender demand in perfect Korathi. Learned from his translator in just 3 days. The Korathi commander had laughed at first. Then the explosions started. Marcus had given them one chance to leave peacefully. When they refused, he'd shown them what human determination looked like. By the time the smoke cleared, the entire hegemony battle group was in retreat, and Marcus Chen had become the youngest decorated soldier in Coalition history. The war had continued for 3 years. Marcus fought in 17 major battles and countless skirmishes. He'd saved entire colonies, led desperate charges against impossible odds, and earned the respect of alien allies who initially thought humans were just another primitive species. The hegemony learned better. They learned that when you cornered a human, they didn't surrender. They fought harder. They learned that humans would die for strangers, sacrifice themselves for abstract ideals like freedom and justice. They learned that even human children could become weapons of terrifying effectiveness when properly motivated. By the time the peace treaty was signed, the hegemony had stopped calling human emotions a weakness. They'd seen too many human ships ramming their dreadnoughts to save civilian transports. They'd watched too many human soldiers charge plasma cannons to protect evacuation sites. They'd witnessed Marcus Chen, a boy who should have been worried about homework and dating, single-handedly turn the tide of a war. The transport ship shuddered as it docked with Terra Station. Marcus picked up his bag and joined the queue of passengers heading to the airlock. Most were returning business people or diplomats. None of them had spent their teenage years learning alien combat tactics or memorizing the weak points of hegemony battle armor. As he stepped onto the station, Marcus felt Earth's gravity pull at him, slightly stronger than the artificial gravity he'd grown accustomed to on ships and space stations. The air smelled different too, recycled but with hints of the ocean and growing things. Real atmosphere, not the sterile mixture pumped through military vessels. His parents were waiting for him at the arrival gate. His mother cried when she saw him, and his father's hands shook as they embraced. They looked older than he remembered, And he realized he probably looked older to them too. 3 years of war had a way of aging everyone involved. "We're so proud of you," his mother whispered. "Everyone on Earth knows what you did out there." Marcus nodded but didn't trust himself to speak. The boy who had stared down hegemony commanders and negotiated with alien admirals found himself fighting back tears at the sight of his parents. The ride home passed in a blur of questions and careful answers. His parents wanted to know everything. But how could he explain the weight of command decisions made by a child? How could he describe watching friends die in the vacuum of space? Or the satisfaction of outmaneuvering alien generals who had centuries more experience? As they entered the familiar suburbs of New Angeles, Marcus saw normal life continuing around them. Kids played in parks, couples walked hand in hand. Elderly people fed ducks at a pond. The war had barely touched Earth's surface. Most humans had experienced it only through news broadcasts and casualty reports. "There's something we should tell you," his father said carefully as they pulled into their driveway. "About school." Marcus frowned. "School? You missed 3 years," his mother explained. "The education board wants you to complete your high school requirements. They've arranged for you to attend Lincoln High. They have programs for unusual circumstances." School. Marcus almost laughed. After commanding starship squadrons and planning multi-species military operations, they wanted him to sit in classrooms and learn basic mathematics. After earning the Silver Star of Valor from the Terran Coalition and the Crest of Honor from the Altarian Republic, they wanted him to worry about grades and homework assignments. But maybe normal was exactly what he needed. Maybe sitting in a classroom, surrounded by kids his own age who worried about ordinary things like tests and crushes and weekend plans, would help him remember who Marcus Chen had been before the war. The house looked exactly the same as when he'd left. His room was preserved like a shrine to his 13-year-old self. Posters of ancient Earth movies, models of pre-war spacecraft, books about exploration and adventure. It felt like stepping into a museum of someone else's childhood. That night, as Marcus lay in his old bed staring at the ceiling, he could hear the normal sounds of a peaceful world. No alarm klaxons, no weapons charging, no emergency broadcasts, just the distant hum of traffic and the whisper of wind through trees. Tomorrow, he would start at Lincoln High School. Tomorrow, he would try to be a normal teenager, attending classes with kids who had never seen the vast darkness between stars or felt the weight of life and death decisions. He didn't know that some of those kids had already heard about the returning war hero. He didn't know that some of them resented the attention and praise given to the boy soldier. He didn't know that surviving alien warriors and cosmic battles would prove easier than surviving the social warfare of high school. Marcus closed his eyes and tried to prepare himself for a different kind of challenge. One that medals and military training might not help him face. The hallways of Lincoln High School buzzed with the energy of teenage life. Lockers slammed shut, friends called out to each other across crowded corridors, and the smell of cafeteria food mixed with floor cleaner created an atmosphere Marcus had never experienced before. He stood at his locker, reading his class schedule for the 3rd time. Basic mathematics, Terran history, English literature, chemistry, physical education. Subjects that seemed impossibly simple after years of tactical analysis and xenobiology studies. But this was what normal 16-year-olds did, so this was what Marcus would do. "You're the war kid, right?" Marcus turned to find 3 boys standing nearby. The one who had spoken was tall and broad, with the confident posture of someone used to being the biggest person in any room. His name tag read, Brad Kowalski, Senior Class President. "My name's Marcus," he replied quietly. Brad laughed and nudged his friends. "Modest. I like that. So, what was it really like out there? The news made it sound like you were some kind of superhero." The question was asked with a smile, but Marcus had learned to read people during diplomatic negotiations with aliens who could kill him with a thought. Brad wasn't genuinely curious. He was testing, probing for weakness. "It was war," Marcus said simply. "People died. It wasn't fun." "Oh, come on," one of Brad's friends chimed in. "Don't be so serious. You got to fly around space, shoot aliens, be famous. That's gotta beat sitting in algebra class." Marcus closed his locker and picked up his backpack. The weight felt strange, so much lighter than military gear. I should get to class. As he walked away, he heard Brad's voice behind him. Friendly guy. Real down to earth for someone who's supposedly a big hero. Marcus's first few classes passed without incident. Teachers introduced him with obvious pride, mentioning his service record and the honor he'd brought to Earth. His classmates stared with mixtures of curiosity, awe, and something else Marcus couldn't quite identify. It was during lunch that he began to understand the social dynamics at play. The cafeteria was a maze of unwritten rules and invisible territories. Marcus had navigated alien diplomatic protocols and multi-species alliance meetings. But the teenage social hierarchy of Lincoln High proved equally complex. He sat alone at an empty table, eating synthesized protein that somehow tasted worse than military rations. Around him, conversations flowed in English peppered with slang he didn't recognize. References to shows, music, and events he'd missed during his 3 years away. Mind if we sit here? Marcus looked up to see a girl with short black hair and intelligent eyes. Behind her stood 2 other students. A thin boy with nervous energy and a girl with colorful streaks in her hair. I'm Sarah, the first girl said, sitting down across from him. This is Danny and Luna. We run the school newspaper. Oh. Marcus wasn't sure what response was expected. I'm Marcus. We know, Danny said, pulling out a tablet. We were wondering if you'd be interested in an interview? About your experiences in the war? Before Marcus could answer, a shadow fell across their table. Brad Kowalski and his friends had appeared, carrying lunch trays and wearing expressions that managed to be both friendly and threatening. Sorry guys, this table's taken, Brad announced, setting his tray down right next to Marcus. War Hero and I were just getting acquainted. Sarah frowned. We were here first, Brad. Were you? Brad looked around innocently. Funny, I don't see any reserved signs. Do you see any reserved signs, Marcus? Marcus felt the familiar tension that preceded conflict. But this wasn't a battlefield. And these weren't enemy soldiers. These were children playing games he didn't understand, using weapons he wasn't trained to fight. It's fine, he said quietly to Sarah. Maybe we can talk another time. Sarah gathered her things reluctantly, shooting Brad a disgusted look. See you around, Marcus. As the 3 students left, Brad settled more comfortably at the table. Good choice. Those newspaper nerds love to cause trouble with their articles. You don't want to get mixed up with that crowd. What crowd should I get mixed up with? Marcus asked, genuinely curious about the social structure he was navigating. Brad grinned. The right crowd. The popular crowd. People who matter in this school. He gestured around the cafeteria. See, Marcus? High school has rules just like the military. There's a chain of command, and it's important to know where you fit. Over the following weeks, Marcus began to understand what Brad meant. There was indeed a hierarchy at Lincoln High, with Brad and his friends at the top. Star athletes, children of wealthy families, students who seemed to glide through school with an effortless confidence that came from never having faced real hardship. And then there was everyone else. Marcus quickly realized that despite his war record, or perhaps because of it, he didn't fit neatly into Brad's social order. The attention he received from teachers and administrators clearly irritated the established student leaders. Here was someone who had achieved more by age 16 than most people would in their entire lives, but who didn't play by the same rules that governed teenage politics. The first direct confrontation came during physical education class. Coach Williams had announced they would be playing dodgeball, a game that Marcus had never encountered during his military training. As the class divided into teams, he found himself grouped with the less athletic students, while Brad's friends dominated the opposing side. Try not to embarrass yourself too badly, War Hero, called out Jake Morrison, one of Brad's closest allies, as he hefted a rubber ball. This might be a little different from fighting space monsters. The whistle blew, and chaos erupted. Marcus watched balls fly through the air with practiced eyes that had tracked incoming missiles and energy blasts. The patterns were simple. The trajectories predictable. Within 30 seconds, he had dodged every throw aimed at him while his teammates were systematically eliminated. Now it was just Marcus against 7 opponents. Jake Morrison wound up for a powerful throw, clearly intending to end the game with dramatic flair. Marcus shifted slightly, letting the ball whistle past his ear by inches. A second ball came from his left. He ducked under it smoothly. A third and fourth ball arrived simultaneously. He rolled forward, letting them collide harmlessly above him. The gymnasium fell silent except for the sound of balls bouncing off walls. Marcus stood alone in the center of the court, untouched, while his opponents stared in disbelief. "Lucky," Jake muttered, but his voice lacked conviction. Coach Williams blew his whistle. "Impressive reflexes, Chen. Military training pays off." As they walked back to the locker room, Marcus overheard heated whispers among Brad's group. "Show off. Thinks he's better than everyone. Probably made up half those war stories anyway." That afternoon, Marcus found his locker vandalized. Someone had scrawled "fake hero" across the metal door in permanent marker. When he reported it to the administration, they expressed sympathy but seemed unable to identify the culprit. The harassment escalated gradually. His homework assignments went missing from his desk. Someone spread rumors that his medals were purchased rather than earned. During group projects, he found himself excluded from teams, forced to work alone while his classmates formed their own alliances. It was subtle, calculated, and entirely legal within the framework of school rules. Nothing Brad's group did could be definitively proven or punished by teachers. They had turned social isolation into an art form. Marcus had faced down alien warlords and survived cosmic battles, but he found himself struggling against an enemy he couldn't fight with conventional tactics. How do you counter whisper campaigns? How do you defend against social exclusion? How do you respond to attacks designed to make you look bad if you retaliate? During one particularly difficult lunch period, as he sat alone while surrounding tables buzzed with conversation he wasn't invited to join, Marcus realized something that chilled him more than any battlefield experience. These kids had turned his greatest weakness against him. His inability to relate to normal teenage concerns, his lack of experience with ordinary social dynamics, his complete unfamiliarity with the petty cruelties that children inflicted on each other. All of it made him vulnerable in ways that enemy fire never had. He was Marcus Chen, decorated war veteran, savior of colonies, and respected by alien commanders across 3 star systems. But in the ecosystem of Lincoln High School, he was just another outsider who didn't belong, and Brad Kowalski was making sure everyone knew it. The breaking point came 3 months into the school year. During what should have been a routine assembly about college preparation, Marcus sat in the packed auditorium, listening to a guidance counselor discuss scholarship opportunities, when Principal Rodriguez stepped to the microphone for an unexpected announcement. "Before we conclude today's assembly, I'd like to recognize one of our students who has brought tremendous honor to our school and our community. Marcus Chen's service record speaks for itself, but I've just received word that the Terran Coalition has nominated him for the Cross of Valor, the highest military decoration available to human service members." Applause rippled through the auditorium, but Marcus noticed that several sections remained conspicuously quiet. He could feel eyes on him, some admiring, others resentful. "Marcus," Principal Rodriguez continued, "would you please stand so we can properly acknowledge your achievements?" Reluctantly, Marcus rose from his seat. The applause grew louder, but he could hear whispered comments from nearby students. "Such a show-off. Bet his parents paid for that nomination. Why does he get special treatment for doing his job?" As he sat back down, Marcus caught sight of Brad Kowalski's expression. The senior's face showed naked hostility, as if Marcus's recognition was a personal insult. After the assembly, Marcus headed to his locker to find a crowd gathered around it. Someone had posted a crude drawing showing a stick figure in a military uniform running away from alien monsters, with the caption, "Earth's Greatest Coward," written in large letters underneath. "Artistic, isn't it?" Brad's voice came from behind the crowd. "Amazing what people create when they're inspired by true stories." Marcus stared at the drawing, feeling something cold settle in his stomach. Not anger. He'd learned to control that emotion during combat situations. What he felt was something deeper and more dangerous. The calm clarity that came before decisive action. "You think this is funny?" he asked quietly. Brad stepped closer, emboldened by the audience of students watching the confrontation. I think it's educational. Helps people understand the difference between real courage and manufactured heroics. You want to understand courage? Marcus's voice remained level, but something in his tone made the surrounding students step back instinctively. Let me tell you about courage. He turned to face the crowd that had gathered. And when he spoke, his voice carried the same authority that had once commanded alien crews and human soldiers in the depths of space. Courage isn't what you think it is, he began. It's not charging into battle without fear. It's not being naturally brave or born special. Courage is being absolutely terrified and doing what needs to be done anyway. The hallway had grown quiet. Even students who weren't part of the original crowd had stopped to listen. I was 13 when I first faced a Karathi shock trooper, Marcus continued. 8 feet tall. Armor that could stop tank rounds. Weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds. I was so scared I threw up twice before engaging the enemy. But there were civilians behind me, families with children who couldn't defend themselves. He looked directly at Brad as he spoke the next words. Real courage isn't about being tough enough to hurt people weaker than you. Real courage is about being terrified and protecting them anyway. Brad's face flushed red. You think you're so much better than everyone else. You think your little war games make you special. No, Marcus replied. I think they make me responsible. Something shifted in the crowd's dynamics. Students who had been passive observers began to pay attention differently. Sarah from the newspaper pushed through to the front, her tablet recording everything. Responsible for what? Brad demanded. For remembering what I learned out there. Marcus pulled the defaced poster down from his locker, crumpling it in his hands. I learned that strength isn't about intimidating people who can't fight back. I learned that real enemies don't hide behind social rules and whisper campaigns. And I learned that when someone tries to make others feel small, it's usually because they feel small themselves. The words hit Brad like physical blows. For the first time since Marcus had arrived at Lincoln High, the senior's confidence wavered visibly. You don't know anything about me, Brad said, but his voice lacked its usual arrogance. I know enough, Marcus replied. I know you're scared that someone might get attention you think belongs to you. I know you're threatened by the idea that achievement comes from sacrifice rather than popularity. And I know you've been using fear to control people who should be your friends, not your subjects. Sarah stepped forward with her tablet still recording. Is this true, Brad? Have you been orchestrating the harassment campaign against Marcus? The senior looked around desperately, realizing that the dynamics had shifted completely. The crowd was no longer watching a confrontation between a war hero and a popular student. They were watching a bully being exposed by someone who understood real conflict. This is ridiculous. Brad tried to regain control. He's been here 3 months and acts like he runs the place. Someone needs to put him in his perspective. What perspective is that? The voice came from the back of the crowd. Danny, the nervous newspaper student, pushed forward with a tablet full of notes. The perspective that says serving your species in wartime makes you arrogant? The perspective that says earning respect through sacrifice is somehow unfair to people who expect respect just for being popular? More voices joined in. Students who had been silent during months of subtle harassment began to speak up. I saw what you did to his locker. You told everyone not to include him in study groups. You've been spreading rumors since day one. Marcus watched the social structure that Brad had carefully constructed begin to crumble under scrutiny. But rather than feeling victorious, he felt something closer to pity. These weren't enemy soldiers following orders or alien commanders pursuing strategic goals. These were children who had learned the wrong lessons about power and respect. Brad, he said quietly, loud enough for everyone to hear. You want to know what I learned fighting real enemies? I learned that the strongest people are the ones who lift others up, not tear them down. I learned that respect earned through fear isn't respect at all. It's just temporary control. And I learned that real leaders protect the people around them, even from other people around them. He stepped closer, and his voice took on the tone he'd once used to address coalition troops before dangerous missions. You have a choice. You can keep playing these games, trying to tear down anyone who threatens your position, or you can start acting like someone worthy of the leadership role you claim to want. Quote, The hallway was completely silent now. Even teachers had stopped to listen from doorways and intersections. Brad looked around at the faces surrounding him, some hostile, some disappointed, all paying attention in ways they hadn't before. The social order he'd built through intimidation and exclusion was dissolving in real time. "What do you want from me?" he asked. And for the first time, he sounded like the teenager he actually was, rather than the imposing figure he'd constructed. Marcus considered the question seriously. What did he want? Revenge? Public humiliation? A dramatic victory that would establish his own dominance? No. What he wanted was what he'd always fought for. From the Outer Rim Wars to this high school hallway. "I want you to be better," he said simply. "I want you to use your influence to build people up instead of tearing them down. I want you to remember that leadership means taking care of everyone, not just the people who make you feel important." He looked around at the assembled students, Sarah with her tablet, Danny with his nervous energy, Luna with her colorful hair, and dozens of others who had been watching this drama unfold. "All of you," he continued, "have more potential than you realize. You live in the safest, most prosperous period in human history because people chose to sacrifice for abstract ideals like justice and protection of the innocent. Don't waste that gift by making each other miserable over petty social hierarchies." The crowd began to disperse gradually, students talking quietly among themselves as they headed to their next classes. But the energy in the hallway had changed fundamentally. The fear that had kept people silent was gone, replaced by something healthier and more honest. Brad remained standing by Marcus's locker long after most of the crowd had left. Finally, he spoke. "How do you do it? How do you make people listen to you like that?" Marcus finished cleaning the last of the vandalism from his locker door. "I don't make them do anything. I just tell the truth and let them decide what to do with it." "The truth about what?" "That everyone deserves to be treated with dignity. That strength comes from protecting others, not controlling them. That real courage means standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." Brad was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know how to do that." "Then learn," Marcus said, shouldering his backpack. "You've got 4 years of high school left to practice. That's more time than I had to learn how to command a starship squadron." As Marcus walked away toward his next class, he heard Brad call after him. "Marcus, I'm sorry. About all of it." Marcus paused and turned back. "Apology accepted. But don't apologize to me. Apologize to everyone you made feel small. Then work to make sure it doesn't happen again." Over the following weeks, Lincoln High School transformed in small but noticeable ways. Brad began using his influence to include, rather than exclude, organizing study groups and defending students who had previously been targets. Sarah's newspaper published a series of articles about bullying and social hierarchies that sparked campus-wide discussions about respect and leadership. Marcus found himself slowly but genuinely integrated into the school community. Not as a war hero to be worshipped or resented, but as a student who had learned important lessons about courage and responsibility and was willing to share them. On the day the Cross of Valor ceremony was announced, Marcus stood once again in front of his locker. But this time, instead of vandalism, he found handwritten notes from classmates expressing pride, gratitude, and friendship. As he read through them, Sarah appeared beside him with her ever-present tablet. "Mind if I ask you something?" she said. "Do you ever miss it? The war? I mean, the clarity of having real enemies and clear missions?" Marcus thought about it seriously. "Sometimes, but then I remember that the whole point of fighting those battles was to protect this normal life, ordinary problems, teenagers arguing about homework and dating and weekend plans. This is what we were fighting for. Even when those teenagers are making your life miserable?" Marcus smiled. The first completely genuine smile he'd worn since arriving at Lincoln High. Especially then, because it means they have the luxury to worry about social status instead of survival. That's not a problem. That's a victory. The bell rang, signaling the start of another day at school. Marcus closed his locker and headed toward class, surrounded by friends he'd earned, not through military achievements, but through the same courage that had carried him through 3 years of war. The courage to do what was right, even when it was difficult. Behind him, Brad Kowalski was helping a freshman carry heavy books to class, learning that real leadership meant service rather than dominance. And in the halls of Lincoln High School, a different kind of peace treaty had been negotiated. One that proved human beings could overcome their worst impulses and build something better, whether they were fighting among the stars or simply trying to survive the complex battlefield of teenage life.